Also with us is Kayvan Khalatbari, who is part owner of Denver Relief, a medical marijuana dispensary in Denver. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Yeah, Larry, thanks for having me.
You've been in this business quite a long time in the medical marijuana side of it. Do you see it as all good that recreational cannabis is now legal?
Oh, without a doubt. I've been in the retail portion of the medical industry here for about 4 years in Colorado. But prior to that, I was a big advocate, activist, and volunteer for Safer and Sensible Colorado, two of the groups that kind of spearheaded the A64 social legalization here. So I really think it's in the long run, this is really what needs to happen. We're talking about the injustice here, the social burden that's created from criminalizing something as simple as marijuana that's safer than alcohol, that's safer than tobacco, two things that are legal. We're creating huge barriers for people in their lives, educationally, financially, getting their kids and their homes taken away from. This is the right thing to do, even beyond marijuana being a medicine.
You have already a medical marijuana oversight board, as I understand it, in Colorado. So what's going to happen with the implementation? Is that board going to take over jurisdiction, or who's got it?
Well, that's still to be determined fully. The governor here just actually yesterday certified the election results, which made it official that Colorado is moving forward with this, so the possession part's there. But as far as the retail sales go, he put together a task force of 24 people all throughout the industry, all throughout the community of Colorado to really define these rules. We're really at an advantage here in Colorado because the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division that was created under the Department of Revenue here in Colorado is already in place, and it's been operating for 2 years. We have a pretty large set of rules and regulations that we must abide by, and we have been. So we can take that and chop it down, take out a lot of the patient tracking that exists, and really tailor it to the social use. I think we're at a great advantage because of that.
Are most of the medical marijuana distributors going to convert into retail marijuana establishments?
Well, it's yet to be seen. There is a big eye on that because people who do currently hold a medical license in Colorado, like we do, has the first right to apply for those social use licenses. So I think what we're waiting to see is, one, what happens with these rules. Is it going to be put together in a fashion that makes sense for us? Because, we have 600 patients. There's plenty of people that have thousands of patients, and that's a big move if it's not going to be the right move. We want to see what the federal response is going to be, if anything. I agree with Morocco that I think that the feds are going to allow this to happen, but there's a lot of people that just want to make sure that that's the case. They want to see where these rules are headed before that happens, before that transfer takes place. We're
talking with Kayvan Khalatbari, who is part owner of Denver Relief, a medical marijuana dispensary in Denver, Colorado, with the signature yesterday by Governor Hickenlooper, putting into law the initiative passed by voters allowing for the recreational use of cannabis in Colorado. Washington state voters have done similarly, and we're talking with Morocco Kayashna about what's happening in Washington state as its Alcohol Liquor Control Board has a year to come up with the guidelines for how it's going to oversee marijuana there. But in the meantime, it is legal to use marijuana in those two states, albeit within the federal illegality of marijuana, and that issue still to be resolved. Dave in Costa Mesa, welcome.
What's going to happen when the Fed change their mind, what's going to happen to investors' investments? Can they sue the state? And also, what about enforcement of driving under the influence when you're under the influence of marijuana? How are they going to set those standards?
Morocco, you want to talk from the Washington state perspective?
Washington state's initiative has set per se standards for marijuana DWIs. If someone commits an act of probable cause in a car and they're pulled over and their active THC levels are above 5 nanograms, they would be charged with a driving under the influence. And so our law is written fairly tight that way. As far as the ability to sue the state, I don't believe that you would be able to do so. And so obviously there is a risk for investors. But there's enough of us, I believe, who believe that the risk is low enough that I don't suspect that's going to inhibit people from investing into it.
Now, the 5 nanogram level how recently could someone, or how long ago, smoked marijuana and still have that level in their blood?
Really good question. As this issue was very hot in Washington State, and as a longtime medical marijuana activist and someone who's also been running a dispensary for 5 years, I wanted to have my own self-tested. So I put myself out this way. I'm a lightweight woman. I have low body fat content, so that's an advantage. I consume 4 ounces of cannabis a month. That's fairly high use generally. I take a hit of hash at about 4:30 in the morning, and I've managed to get 3 tests at 8:07, 8:13, and 8:15. And I just blew 3 nanos each of the tests. My sense is that if I consume the equivalent of about a 0.75 gram marijuana cigarette, that I would have to wait about 2.5 hours.
Okay, so it's kind of similar to imbibing alcohol.
That's how I see it. That's I don't have a problem with our law currently. I think it might be fine-tuned later on, but I think the figures are not without reasonableness.
Kayvan, what about in Colorado? What is the DWI level for marijuana?
Well, nothing's set in stone right now. It's actually been something that's come up as a bill for the last 3 years, and this is going to be the 4th year that it's going to be brought up again, and it's been stuck at that 5 nanogram limit as well. We actually had one of our marijuana critics here for the Westward paper, local Village Voice paper, do a test similar to what Morocco was talking about, and he had smoked the day prior and had abstained for 24 hours. Again, he's a heavy user, and he had actually tested above that 5 nanogram level. So what folks are talking about here is maybe going in with a 15 nanogram limit and, compromising at 10. So, but it's still yet to be defined here. It wasn't in the language as it was in Washington. However, we do have it's an equalization bill here, so the same rules apply to marijuana as apply to alcohol. No public use, no driving while intoxicated.
One wonders if it might be worthwhile to actually do driver tests, to try and figure out what the level of impairment is at certain levels in the bloodstream and set the standard according to public safety. Is someone doing that?
Go ahead, Morocco.
There's a bit of a lack of research in it right now. Is what sort of the issue is. I believe that such research would be absolutely needed. It may not come in the end. The research may not come up with an exact figure. I, for example, might not be intoxicated or altered driving in a car at 10 nanograms, and someone who has never experienced cannabis before has 5 nanograms and is clearly completely altered.
That's the same way with alcohol, though, but we still come up with a standard sort of based on the general population.
That's correct.
Okay. We're at 866-893-KPCC or the AirTalk page, kpcc.org. Trebek writes on the page, until the feds stop prosecuting, the black market forces will continue to exist. Even if consumption became legal everywhere, supply-side legalization is necessary to stop cartels from controlling the market. You can't establish legitimate businesses with a central government potentially shutting you down. Share your comments on the AirTalk page, kpcc.org. Kayvan, what do you think of that comment?
Well, I think that people need to understand that we're in this for the long haul. Legalizing in Colorado and Washington isn't going to change everything overnight. It's not going to make the system perfect. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be put at a disadvantage over time because of the gray area in these laws and the uncertainty with things like the DUI. But what we have to focus on is if we can, over time, create this federal legalization and distribution and regulation system that it will reduce that black market. I mean, I would rather, and I think most people would agree, rather go to a liquor store and purchase our 6-pack of beer than go to Joe's Homebrew down at the house and purchase something in a potentially unsafe environment. It's regulated and it's safe, and people will see that as a very viable alternative for purchasing as opposed to going to a park or having a drug dealer go to your house. There is, as you touched on earlier, there's going to be oversight as to sanitation and safety, and that's really where this is headed. You don't know what you're smoking if you buy it from someone on the street. You can be pretty sure that what you're smoking in one of these retail environments or one of these regulated environments is going to be safe to consume.
Fred in Bellflower says if you imbibe edible cannabis, the metabolites stay in your bloodstream in high contents for much longer, so the reading would be inaccurate weeks afterwards. Even if that is the case, if the metabolites are there, would that mean that the effect of the THC would be gone, even if the evidence of consumption is there? Do you know, Morocco?
That's why I noted at the beginning that I was a lightweight individual, that I have low body fat content. Definitely those with high body fat content will retain longer, and it would show a more inaccurate reading.
Don and Tustin wondering how your two states are going to deal with neighboring states and interstate commerce arising from this. Kayvan, do you want to take that on?
Well, I personally think that it's a great avenue for the law enforcement to start focusing on is what drugs are coming into the state and what drugs are leaving it illegally. If we can put what we're doing here in a regulated and legal environment, then law enforcement can most definitely spend more time on focusing on drugs coming into the state and going out of the state illegally. And
is it still going to be illegal to sell marijuana that comes from out of state?
Oh, most definitely. How we have it here in Colorado is on the medical end, we have to produce 70% of what we sell at a minimum. My dispensary, we produce 100% of what we sell, as do a lot of the more well-known centers. And how we're hearing this regulatory structure is going to be defined here in Colorado is there's going to be tiers similar to the brew model. So there's going to be the small microbrew that can only sell within their store and only sell their marijuana. There's going to be the mid-level that can sell a certain amount to other shops, and then there's going to be the coors, so to say, the large scale that can sell to a lot of different centers. But it's going to be only produced within these licensed, regulated facilities that have the oversight. There will not be any marijuana, even from a legal grow at home in Colorado, entering a retail facility.
Morocco, is that the same?
Exactly the same in Washington State. The only other thing I note that our law has said that you'd have to now reside in state for at least 3 months before you'd even be offered an opportunity at getting a license.
Stephen Bell Gardens has a great question. He says he's a commercial driver and any marijuana on a drug test, a positive showing, would be cause for termination. How are employers adapting, if at all, about marijuana usage? Morocco, in Washington State, what latitude?
What I imagine. First of all, the driving issue is a separate issue, but what I imagine will occur, and this is starting to occur up here, particularly since the unions are starting to push on it. P-testing for employment is not, as in the past, has not been only checking for active metabolites. Checking for your use over the previous 30 days. And that's going to change, most likely. This companies that have folks that are driving and stuff, there's still going to be no tolerance.
Okay.
And folks that are employed with firms that are doing business with the Department of Defense, they also will have no tolerance. But I would imagine we'll see P-testing shift to only checking active metabolites.
All right. I want to thank you both very much for being with us and walking us through what's going on in your respective states as voters there have legalized the recreational use of cannabis. That despite the fact the federal government continues to say it is not legal. And we'll see what, if any, enforcement takes place in Washington State or in Colorado. Morocco Kayashna Tocha joining us on Air Talk, and Kayvan Khalatbari joining us as well. Thank you so much. Hetty Lynn Hurdes now has the news.